Wow, it's been a long time since I've had to do that. Anyway, howdy, my name is Dane Madrigal, and I am a musician based out of Cardiff in the United Kingdom in Wales. So that is why it has taken me so long to get back to the Tchaikovsky. However, today we are going to be addressing the next chapter. This is chapter 3, and you got me again. I'm referring to my notes now. The connection of triads showing no external agreement. Fantastic. So, when we talk about voicings and chords and etc. in harmony, really what we're asking ourselves based off of our discussion of functional harmony is how do we tell a story? So if a chord shows no external agreement with another chord that we're trying to lead it to, we're telling a rather difficult story in that situation, because the end and aim of all music is to elicit something out of a listener, basically. And to do that, we have to make the music efficable and make it convincing to that listener. So what we're thinking of now is that we need to take chords that show no external connection and look at a deeper inner meaning to see what they might have in terms of an inner connection. So the real question that we have to ask ourselves are, what are the ways in which we are able to connect those chords? So there are 3 primary ways in which we are able to perceive as listeners chords or voices moving. The first way that we're able to perceive this is parallel motion. So parallel motion is the way in which 2 voices would move together in parallel. Secondly, we have oblique motion. Oblique motion is when one voice stays stagnant while the other one can move drastically or a little on top of it. Also, it can be done where a voice on top stays stagnant and then voices move under it. An example of that would be barbershop ends of tags. The last type of motion that we have is contrary motion, which we'll learn is the most desirable form of it, in which case voices, instead of moving together in a certain direction, that was a poor example of togetherness, move together in a certain direction, move contrary to one another, either away or together. So these are the 3 types that we have available to us. Also, this is a side note as I'm reading these notes. Tchaikovsky actually refers to them in the Romanus. So parallel motion is motus rectus, oblique motion is motus obliquus, and contrary motion is motus contrarius. Snazzy. But anyway, let's get on to the juicy stuff of it. So, if you've studied harmony before, we're about to get to everybody's favorite part of turning in a part writing exercise, parallelisms. So essentially there are 2 parallelisms that we need to avoid, parallel fifths and parallel octaves or eighths. So a parallel fifth, basically the reason is that it's counteractive of independent movement of voices. Not just for the fifths, but also for octaves as well. When we're moving something in parallel motion, no matter what, we're already saying that, okay, these voices probably don't matter as much, or they're creating something that is outside of part writing itself. So really we don't have to concern ourselves much with that, other than we just need to know, don't do parallel fifths, don't do parallel octaves. It doesn't matter if it's an augmented fifth, it doesn't matter if it's a diminished fifth, or it doesn't matter if it's augmented or diminished octaves, all of which of those cases you shouldn't move in parallel motion in the first place in standard functional harmony. So don't do it when they're perfect, and that's mainly what we're talking about, are moving perfect octaves and fifths in parallel. So the answer to our question earlier is no. We can't just move voices from one chord with no external connections to the next chord by just moving the notes to the next closest note in the preceding or postceding chord. That will create these parallel fifths and octaves. So the best example of this that I can show is, say we have in a C major scale, we're going to have a C major chord and we're already playing it in root position. With that C major chord, if we were to go to a D minor chord, logically our hand wants to go C, E, G up to D, F, A. And in that case, we're going triad, triad, and what we just did was go from CG to DA, and that is a parallel fifth. So we're avoiding that by trying to create more smooth and much more congealed voice leading. So then the next question is how do we solve this problem? Basically, the answer is contrary motion, but it's contrary motion without huge skips. We're not doing skips or leaps at this point in voice leading. Mainly the reason that this is the case is because if we start using these big skips and leaps at this point, we're probably going to elicit parallel fifths and octaves. The reason for this is quite simple. I don't know. I don't know the reason. I just had it in my head, but it left me. So maybe Tchaikovsky will address it later. Who's to say? So essentially, after mastering this, someone might be able to connect all the triads of the major scale quite easily and with a great deal of fluidity. The best way that I can show this is just doing an example with you all, so that way it's very easy and clear to see in what ways you can connect chords with the avoidance of these parallel fifths and octaves. So this is chapter 3, exercise 1 in the Tchaikovsky. It is in F major, and it has a very interesting effect being in 6/4 as opposed to 3/2, in which case it would be a simple meter, but it is compound in this case. Nevertheless, we take the part writing rules from previous chapters, which include essentially keeping whatever voice can be kept in the same voice, trying to do that often as possible, and while at the same time, with that being the first priority, then moving voices in a way in which it avoids parallels, fifths, and octaves through contrary motion. So you'll see in larger phrasal areas where there is movement in a certain direction, I will try to orient my counterpoint or my harmony in the opposite direction to try and fit that. So after I finish all of this, we can give it a listen. And that's basically it for today. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, if you need anything, feel free to message me on any platform that I put in the description. So also check the description. It's probably too late at this point, but there's timestamps in there if you wanted them. Or if you want to rewatch any bit of this, it's totally up to you. But other than that, peace.